One of the most understudied aspects and underdiscussed truths in relational psychology is that our needs are not static.
Aubrey Aust is a researcher, writer, and master's candidate at NYU, where she studies relational psychology and philosophy. Her work explores how we build emotional safety, experience intimacy, and reconnect with desire. Drawing on attachment theory, somatic psychology, and the ethics of care, Aubrey focuses on the concept of erotic intelligence, the emotional and embodied wisdom that helps us feel alive in our relationships and in our own skin.
Instead of asking, why don't I feel the same way I used to, start to get curious and say, what is my body asking for now? This is something I want to invite you into. And with that comes so much excitement and potential and newness, and that is where desire and eroticism thrive. Start getting into the practice of asking your body, what do you need today? And then listen.
Just wanted to take a quick minute to tell you how you can get almost $250 worth of free bonuses that will teach you how to improve your desire, how to have more libido, how to get the right tests done to figure out the root causes of low libido from a physical perspective. This is for men and women. And you do this by pre-ordering a copy of my book. My book is coming out in late fall. Projected date is November 1st. And in my book, we're going to talk about all sorts of physical root causes for low libido, how to help pelvic pain, how to help erectile dysfunction, how to help vaginal dryness, how to do this together in your partnerships, and so much more. And when you pre-order a copy, I am giving you almost $250 worth of bonuses right away for your support. So to get that, you simply go to wanttowantit.com or look in the show notes for that direct link. So wanttowantit.com, the name of my book. Now back to our show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Libido Lounge. We have such a cool conversation today with Aubrey Aust coming up here. We're going to talk a little bit about somatic intelligence. We're going to talk about microtraumas, how they get stored in our body. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which I think is where people get lost so oftentimes in their desire, which is the fact that desires, that intimacy, that passion, that our needs around this actually change over time. And one of the things I strongly see in so many couples is we get stuck in these kind of scripts where we're like, well, this is how we're passionate together, or this is how we express desire, and this is how we make love. And then part of the loss of all of these things often happens because we don't update our model within ourselves and our relationships as we find that we grow and change over time. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some about attachment patterns and how these can be safe or unsafe or healthy or unhealthy in your relationship. And then make sure you do join for part 2. You can get part 2 by joining our club. Down in the show notes in part 2, we're going to go into things like how do we cultivate more safety in relationships, and what do we do when we become disconnected and almost disembodied when we are in our passionate moment. So all of that and more. So excited to be here with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have you. So let's start here. So why do you feel, from a standpoint of desire changing over time, why do you feel this happens?
Great question. Honestly, I feel like it's one of the most understudied aspects and underdiscussed truths in relational psychology is that our needs are not static. They inherently shift, right? They shift as we grow, as we age, as we change careers, as we go through really any life transition. So in early adulthood, many of us might be seeking novelty, affirmation, connection as a means of self-discovery. That's all fantastic. But over time, that longing can turn more towards depth or attunement or safety and recognition. And the trouble is, our culture doesn't often teach us how to necessarily adapt to these shifts. So instead, we face almost this pathologization where it's, especially for women, where if you're not feeling, as sexual as you used to be, or simply if your needs change, it's easy to internalize that as a sign that something is wrong. But more often, it's simply a context change that happened for you and your desire is simply responding accordingly. So I found that in the research that I do, staying connected to that desire in these transitions means cultivating more curiosity over critique, because this is completely normal. It happens within any life transition and throughout this span. So instead of asking, why don't I feel the same way I used to, start to get curious and say, what is my body asking for now? So it's a completely normal response to the natural transitions that one has over the course of their life.
So, okay, so let's take a step back and maybe let's define even desire a little bit, because if I'm hearing you correctly, one of the things I'm hearing here is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I want to make sure I'm clear, is that as relationships say grow and change over time, are you saying that like there's like we need to normalize almost a change in like the passion desire for more of this like deepening presence type of desire? Or are we changing the way we're defining it? Can you say a little bit more about that? Because that doesn't feel clear to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So desire and even how we internalize it can shift over time. And you very soundly spoke to the distinction within that is the experience of desire and even wants and needs can shift. So you can frame of a desire itself as an unmet need, something that is not being addressed. And those can radically transform throughout the course of a lifetime based on where you are contextually, relationally, a ton of factors. So if it's tapping into what exactly is desire, that definition can be personal and can shift throughout someone's lifetime. And so by staying connected to it, it's allowing yourself to evolve and letting your needs evolve with you. And that's going to be an individual and ever changing definition.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that and totally agree on that. The other thing I want to just highlight that I see over and over, I should say, I hear over and over again with all the different people in the sex and the intimacy space is that if I were to say like the number one word that I hear used across the board from everybody, it's curiosity. And
Mhm.
that I think is like one of the most fundamental things that I see that we're just, we lose so oftentimes in our long-term relationships. So when it comes to like say the utility of this around, so okay, like so you set the stage, this is desire actually like definition changes over time. We need to be curious to this change. We need to, deepen our ability to be present to what's happening in our body around this. How else though do people begin to understand the change in their needs or preferences as we're defining it? Like where do we, is it like the questions people are asking themselves, or how do you guide in your work people actually understand, oh, this is how I know my desire today is different than my desire in the past?
Right. So important. And it can be incredibly difficult to tap into, right? Half the time, we can't exactly name what we need. And I think something that I
Exactly.
research is called affect theory, what you're feeling in your body before you can even logically parse out that emotion. Because sometimes, when you get that feeling that something is just off, but you can't put your finger on it, or you feel like a tightening in your chest, or something coming over to you physically that maybe logically you haven't even processed yet, but that feeling is still valid. What is that? Sometimes we can't even name it, and that makes it difficult to kind of parse through. But the body contains so much knowledge. And so a lot of what I do, I frame it as what is erotic intelligence. And that's your capacity to stay in relationship with your own desire. It's something we are all constantly working through. And it can happen across time, across change, and across contradiction. It's not just about arousal or performance. It's about being emotionally and somatically attuned to what kind of lights you up. And this is not a one stop shop. It's not, I have taken this course and I have thus gained my erotic intelligence, right? This is a process that we are all going through and cultivating over the course of a lifetime. So it's about recognizing the signals that your body sends, even when you can't name them, still acknowledging that those signals are valid and acknowledging it even when they don't match cultural expectations or expectations of what's going on amongst your friends or what you think you need to be feeling. So it becomes less about validation and more about self recognition.
So, one of the things that comes up sometimes in tantric studies, as well as in just energetic studies, is the differentiation between feelings and emotions. So, I'm wondering, and if this is not your area, we can totally move on because I'm just throwing you a curveball here. But I'm wondering if you can like speak to this a little bit, because what I'm hearing you say in this idea of, oh, how am I going to cultivate more of my needs and, preferences and understand them? How am I going to be able to understand them? it sounds like what you're saying, especially with your somatic history, is like we have to come back to those feelings in the body, the tightness in the chest, that thing that happens in the gut, right? Those types of sensations, it sounds like what you're talking about. So where do you feel, and like I said, if this is not really your world, we can move on. But if so, like where do you feel like emotions come in, and how do you differentiate, hey, wow, I'm feeling emotional about this, and so this is that information, versus wow, my maybe there's not a strong emotion, but my gut is kind of moving into knots, or my heart is feeling like it's fluttering with excitement. Like how are you differentiating like the feelings versus emotions in context of understanding one's needs and desires?
Fantastic question, because this is the line that I'm actually towing with my work is talk therapy is amazing and necessary and helps us parse through those emotions. And I think there is a current need, especially in where we are in popular psychology and where mental health is currently in the larger population, to be more in tune with the feelings and somatics and a greater integration of the current practices we have now. And so tuning into the body and what it's telling us, I think needs to be there has to be a greater focus there, especially as our erotic intelligence develops and as our relationship, our personal relationship with desire continues to deepen. And so at the end of the day, this sounds like an incredibly simple answer, but it's taking time to stop and pause and reflect and actually feel what's coming up. And then recognizing, whoa, what are the emotions I have associated with that? And simply taking those breaks, which, as I said, sounds so incredibly oversimplistic, but in the fast paced world that we are in, where rest is now becoming sadly a luxury from time to time, it's a necessity to kind of take that break and get back in tune with where we are and what we actually need.
Yeah, I think so much of the time we have feelings and we are really taught to ignore them.
Yeah.
And I think so much of the time we're taught to ignore them, or like push through, like you're saying, like rush, 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 do. You have that feeling. Well, you don't need to attend to it. And, certainly I think there is like there is the need, I think, in life for like healthy suppression, meaning like, oh, if I'm like feeling this feeling and I'm in the middle of a major meeting, then it's like, okay, well, now I can't address this. But the idea of healthy suppression in my mind is like, okay, feeling, I hear you, I see you.
Mhm.
This is when we're gonna, like safely go in and explore you later today in the bath,
Yeah.
or tomorrow, morning before our work day, and still allowing that space for going there. So it's not like real suppression. It's just like, hey, we're gonna put a pause on this and come back to it here in the next, little while when it's a healthier time.
Open up the feelings box. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Well, I want to talk about attachment patterns, because we have talked about attachment a little bit on this podcast before. So, listeners, make sure you go back and listen to some of these other episodes. But I think it really is such an important topic to come back to, because I just think it informs so much. And so when we're talking about this overarching thing around erotic intelligence, knowing our desires, being able to work with our changing desires over time, where do attachment styles come into play with all that? How does that influence this kind of bigger picture of, eroticism?
Yeah, there's so much work being done in the attachment theory space right now, specifically pertaining to how it contributes to our feelings of desire in intimate relationships. Of course, attachment patterns in early childhood have been largely studied and are still hugely influential. Your immediate caregivers early on in life have a major role in how we experience attachment later on in life. However, something that I think needs more attention is attachment patterns are not 100% fixed. You grow up and you begin to have anxious or avoidant attachment tendencies, that is something that can be changed over time based on your relational environment and the relationships you cultivate. So, if you are someone who tends to lean more anxious but get into a relationship with a secure partner, you might be able to move more towards that secure style of attachment over time. So they are malleable, which I think it gives a lot of hope and excitement because so often we talk about being, fixed in these boxes of attachment patterns. And yeah, they're fantastic to recognize patterns in ourselves over time. That's wonderful data, but you're not stuck there. And it's something that we are all growing in relationally as we move throughout our lives. Now, how exactly does this contribute to desire? It absolutely contributes to how we are able to show up in intimacy. how we register intimate experiences, how our bodies either open up or shut down based on the partners, the situations, how safe you feel in that relationship.
If you haven't taken a minute yet to go to wanttowantit.com to get your bonuses, almost $250 worth of free bonuses for pre-ordering my book, I recommend you do that now. We're going to go through so many reasons and so many solutions to fixing low libido for both men and women. It is action-packed with solutions from supplements to diet to lifestyle to lab tests you should talk to your doctor about to physical routines you can change. So many things designed to help support estrogen and testosterone and circulation and erectile dysfunction, vaginal dryness, so much more. So if you go to wanttowantit.com, you can find that book for pre-order, and you can also then take advantage of the almost $250 worth of bonuses I am giving away for pre-order that will not be available for long. Now let's get back to our episode.
And so it does ultimately come down to relational safety. And if you feel comfortable opening up, expressing yourself, expressing your needs and desires, and feeling like that person will not shut you down, judge you, leave you in that moment, but instead it's a safe space to discuss what you want, that can largely influence your attachment patterns, and how you show up in those moments are influenced by your attachment patterns.
So, do you recommend that people that are say that if somebody knows that they are, say, more of a anxious or avoidant attachment style, for example, do you recommend that they purposely try to find a secure attachment partner? And like, if that's the case, how does somebody like begin to do we put that on our dating profiles, or like, how do we begin to really sort that out?
That might be the next Hinge category. What is your attachment style? Actually, that would be a great question prompt for anyone who's looking for dating profile advice.
Agreed.
Right. I mean, ideally, we are all moving towards that secure attachment style, right? However, we live in the real world, and that is not the case for everyone. And that's part of our relational work, and the relational fabric that we are all weaving is moving towards secure. And that involves a combination of our interpersonal relationships and the personal work that we are all doing on our own. So it's about recognizing those tendencies within ourselves and then figuring out what is that work that I need to put in to move towards that secure attachment style. And it absolutely, intimate relationships are so huge in influencing how we experience and express attachment. But a great way to work on your own personal attachment patterns is to do so in relationships in which you already feel safe and cared for and loved. And that doesn't have to be a romantic partnership. We can absolutely express this with family, with friends with whom that we feel that resonance, and we feel like you are there for me, you are showing up for me. I feel safe in this connection, and I feel safe expressing myself. And starting to name those needs or those patterns that come up of saying, hey, I tend to draw away in conflict repeatedly. Or saying, hey, when you don't immediately text me back, that brings up feelings within me. And can we talk about this? And by starting to name that and bring the relational truth into existence with people with whom we already feel safe, that can help move us more towards that secure attachment style.
Yeah, one of the things I talk about in my second book is name it, don't shame it.
Yeah.
Right. Love that. And I think it's such an important component of this. So in what you're saying around like naming, and it sounds like you're, talking about like an anxious attachment style where somebody's maybe not showing up a certain way and maybe they're more avoidant or they're not responding. And then there's an internal just, intensity and anxiety that is, happening there. So can we apply that then? So that sounds like, okay, well, here's a great starting point is say in a relationship with somebody that is maybe not romantic. So what about say somebody that is in a relationship and they want to start asking for more of their needs? Maybe they want to have, more foreplay before they actually engage sex, or maybe they want to just try a new thing and they have like a new need and how they're going to express intimately and sexually. Is there a certain way from a standpoint of relationship for an anxious person, and then let's do the same thing for say an avoidant person, that you would recommend, say, starting a conversation with their partner, their primary partner?
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, same response for both styles is have the conversation not immediately in a moment of intimacy. This is something where you already feel like you're in a safe space. It's conversational, not bringing things up when emotions are at their emotional peak, right? Because when we are in an arousal state, we are not thinking clearly. That is not when you're making your best or not your best choices, but your most logical choices where you can clearly articulate and speak your needs. So, in those moments where, hey, it might be over a casual cup of coffee or something that feels like a pretty low stakes environment of just naming, don't not, they name it, don't shame it, right? I love that line so much. And saying, I have this desire that I want to express to you. This is something that I'm curious about. As you said before, that word curiosity can hold so much power because it's not saying this is not something you're giving me. It's saying this is something I want to invite you into. And with that comes so much excitement and potential and newness. And that is where desire and eroticism thrive.
Yeah, amazing. I appreciate that. There's the simplicity of like, oh, this is actually no matter what your attachment style is. If somebody's like, well, I'm not really sure where I'm at, these same principles can apply for you kind of wherever you're at on the spectrum of attachment variants. And I'm going to ask you kind of probably our final question for today around authenticity, but also just want to remind our listeners here that a really fun way you can start bringing in some extra love and intimacy into your relationship is if you get the Quickie kit by Phoria. It comes with 3 different of their amazing products. My favorite one is their lube that is an MCT based lube because so many people are putting lube on their genitals like coconut oil or things that are natural that are actually antimicrobial. And we don't want to do that on our genitals. We have a healthy microbiome there. So Phoria products are some of the cleanest on the market. They have an amazing arousal oil that kind of brings heat to the tissues before you actually get to your play. So a really fun way if you're like, oh, bringing back that desire, where do we start, foreplay, etc. And I have a coupon code for you all under the show notes. So just make sure you look for that. Okay, so my next question is, let's talk about authenticity because I think this is a really important thing and we can get probably super meta on this topic, right? But so many times I feel like in our relationships, whether we're talking about our sexual relationships or not, our primary partner, we could be saying sexual, we could be saying more emotional intimacy, whatever it is. I think so much of the time we get into these relationships based upon the idea of what it should be, right? And I think it was kind of like the Hollywood white picket fence, thing for a while. I think that model has not been as pushed, but now it's kind of this model of like everybody has to do it all the time and run themselves ragged and like it's like the perfect woman syndrome and the perfect man syndrome and everybody just has to operate in this way, which is just not realistic. So, what do you feel from a standpoint of authenticity? Like, what does this mean? And like, how does showing up more authentically in oneself, like, what does that have to do with the relationship as far as what you see in intimacy?
Right. As you said, we could get down a whole philosophical rabbit hole on this. I do so much on the psychology and philosophy of self and how this idea of the self is a performance. We are constantly tailoring ourselves, our relationships to what we think we should be, and the societal scripts that come along with that, how we are expected to show up. And so, one small step to connect with that authentic self, you can do all the journaling, read all the self help books, do that. They're both fantastic options. But I also encourage to start a non demanding relationship with your own body. This doesn't even have to be through sex or self pleasure, but just through attention. And start getting into the practice of asking your body, what do you need today? And then listen. And this can be something as simple as gentle movement. Maybe it wants to stretch. Maybe it wants to be still. Maybe that day you need to be held or nourished, or you want to cry that day. What does it look like to honor that impulse? And starting to tune in with the body, even doing an act as simple as placing a hand on the heart and one on the belly, and just sending that signal to your nervous system saying, you're safe here. I'm listening to you. And starting that as a practice, that's beginning to build that trust again with yourself. And through that, you're able to show up more authentically.
Yeah, amazing. I think there's so much to be said on that. Like one thing I'll share is that I, as an athlete, I have like my like regimen, right? Around like this is what I do on this day, and this is my long run day, and this is when I do my leg workout, and et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things I've been practicing lately is actually tuning in, like you're saying, around like does this feel like this would be the right thing today? And it's like, yeah, like technically this is like the easiest day of the week for it to be my long run day. But maybe I didn't sleep as well the night before. Maybe my body's exhausted for some reason, and really tuning in a little bit more to actually today would be better to just take a long walk and be more restful. And I think those small little things that we do around, hey, we can have our, agenda, but just like flexible, have some like flexibility with this is being attuned to the body's needs, I think is so, so important.
For sure. Absolutely. So important to tune in.
So we're going to talk, everybody, in part 2 about safety. Like I said, we're going to talk about why women in particular disconnect. Men can obviously disconnect too, but we do see this oftentimes higher with intimacy with women. And it's almost like this disembodied scenario that happens where it's like you're not feeling the sensations in your body. And you're so, it's one thing to be like, oh, the grocery list comes into your head and your mind wanders and comes back. It's a very different thing to be like, I can't be present in my body during this scenario. So we're going to talk about that and so much more in part 2. So look for that in the show notes. I do know that you put out amazing monthly content for your readers. So just tell us a little bit about like how people stay in touch with you and, kind of the value you bring with your email list. Cause I know that's a great way for people to still get amazing content like this and more from you.
For sure. Easiest way to stay in touch is to sign up on to my mailing list called Open Loops. You can also follow me on Instagram at Aubrey__Aust to keep up with where I am in my research.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This is another episode of The Lounge. See you all next time. Ciao for now.
Thank you for listening to the Libido Lounge. Please don't keep me a secret. Please share this with your friends. You can find me on YouTube, on Instagram, as well as how to work with me at mylibidodoc.com.